Surprisingly, I ended up really enjoying the first Puma Forever Run because it was cushioned and comfortable. And I didn't even mind that it was a light stability shoe. But this is the Forever Run 2, and Puma seems to have doubled down on the motion control aspects of the shoe. So will this still be a shoe that I can enjoy? It's time to lace up the Forever Run 2 and take it for a run. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kafuzi and I'm a non-elite runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today I want to talk to you guys all about the Puma Forever Run 2. But before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that was sent to me for the purpose of review, so I did not have to pay for these shoes. However, nobody's paying me to make this video or to include their brand in this video, and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Forever Run 2, and let's start with the specs. This is a 38mm stack height shoe with a 10mm drop, giving us 28mm of stack height in the forefoot. Now this foam is unique in that it's still called nitro foam, but it's a dual density foam system. You can kind of get a hint of that as you look at the two different colors of exposed foam that you see in this shoe. There's kind of like a white foam and then a light blue colored foam. And we saw something similar in last year's Forever Run where they had a little cradle or a bathtub for a softer foam insert to sit inside. And then those materials are subjected to the supercritical process where there is heat and pressure applied and nitrogen gas is added to the equation. And those materials will then meld into a single block of foam that has two different densities. Now the difference between last year and this year is that there's no longer a bottom portion of white foam underneath the softer blue foam. This time the blue foam goes all the way down to the ground, so there's more blue foam, that softer stuff directly underfoot. You still have the white sidewalls though, so that will still prevent your foot from caving in too far one way or the other as your foot hits the ground, but now you're gonna get more of that blue goodness. Now to protect all this midsole foam, we've got Puma grip, and there's plenty of it on this shoe. Not only do you get a good amount of coverage, but you're also getting a thick layer of that rubber here. And one of the things that I will note is that you've got a little kind of button of rubber right underneath the arch. And this area underneath the arch is really significant. It's something that I always see kind of highlighted in stability or light stability shoes. There's usually some sort of reinforcement right in this spot underneath here, and over on the side of the shoe, you can usually see that there's something going on with the geometry that shows you that this foam is not intended to crumple underneath the arch as your foot hits the ground. And so for people that need stability, this should be something that's really reassuring. For me, as someone who doesn't like stability shoes because they tend to really bother my arches and then my knees eventually, this is something that usually is a bit of a red flag. Now moving to the upper, we have a really nice redesign compared to what we saw last year. The shoe is, I think, maturing really nicely. I love the way that they've reworked the upper. We've got this Puma logo that is interwoven between these other, I guess, claw marks, since this is a Puma shoe, that I think kind of just drape really well on top of this upper here. And it also kind of reminds me of the lanes of a track. In the front of the toes, you got a nice breathable material, and that moves up to a very lightly padded tongue, very thin, exactly the way that I want a tongue for this class of shoe. And then there is a very generous amount of padding all throughout the heel collar here, and that's finished with a little piece of knit right at the top that ends in the pull tab. Now, another element of stability that they've added to this shoe is the plastic armor that's on the outer portion at the back of the shoe. This is another element that is intended to make sure that the heel of your foot stays locked into place and doesn't slide around as your foot is hitting the ground. Again, another attempt to control excess motion that might happen on the shoe. In terms of fit, I went with normal running shoe size, and that worked really well for me. I felt like there had plenty of room for the toes at the end and enough volume on top of the toes as well for the shoe to feel comfortable, but it also still felt like it was very precise and tailored. It's a well-fitting shoe, but it's not overly snug by any means. The, I think, major drawback, from the design of the upper is that the laces are just unusually short. I had a hard time even just getting a double knot in the shoe, shoe, and I think that with the current laces that are in the shoe, there's just no way you're gonna get a runner's knot in here, even though there are holes in the shoe to provide for it. But overall, I think that's just a small misstep in what is otherwise a beautifully redesigned upper. And in total, this shoe comes in at a weight of 295 grams or 10.4 ounces. Now that we've talked about what this shoe is like on paper, let's talk about what this shoe is like on the road. In my early discussions with Puma about what this update would be like, they told me that this shoe would become much more stable, much more kind of solidly in the stability shoe category compared to Forever Run version 1. But I think one of my favorite parts about Forever Run version 1 was that it was a light stability shoe for those people who really needed it, and for those people who didn't want it, like myself, the stability and motion control elements were pretty much invisible. So I had a lot of concerns going into testing version 2, but I'm very happy to say that I didn't have any problems running in version 2. And in fact, I really enjoyed my time running in this shoe. The Forever Run 2 is really quite nice for daily training. It absorbs impact from the road really well, but it's not a mushy experience. In fact, it's a really bouncy and responsive shoe. It's really easy to get into a nice rhythm with this shoe for my daily training efforts. Now, I do feel a little bit of something happening underneath the arch and kind of on the medial side of the heel. In other words, I could tell that the shoe is preventing my foot from rolling in the way that it normally does and in the way that my foot normally wants to, but it's not a bothersome experience and it doesn't cause me pain like some other stability shoes have done in the past. The heel lockdown on this shoe is really quite solid. I think part of that is because there's just a lot of structure going on in this shoe above and beyond what these plastic pieces are doing. So the heel feels like it's really well seated inside the shoe, and once it's in there, it's not going to be moving a lot side to side or slipping out from the back of the shoe as your foot is picking up off the ground. The one thing that I did know about the lockdown of this shoe though is that on one of my runs where I wore a very low cut sock, which I love to wear low cut socks, I'm old, I ended up getting a lot of chafing at the part where the edge of this tongue, which reaches far down underneath the side of the shoe, was touching my ankle. And so this shoe did make me bleed my own blood just a little bit, but when I put some regular length socks on that were not my lowest cut socks, then I didn't have any issues at all, and the whole thing was very comfortable and had no other chafing problems. And overall, it's a really enjoyable daily training experience. But it is quite different than the Forever Run 1. The Forever Run 1 for me was almost a borderline max cushion experience. It was much more relaxed. It was much softer on the interior portion of the dual densities of foam, and it didn't feel like it really wanted to pick up the pace quite as much as the Forever Run 2 does. And so I feel like these two shoes resemble each other quite a bit, but I do think that there are noticeable differences between version 1 and version 2. Before we wrap up the video, let's take a moment to zoom out and see where the Forever Run 2 might fit within a broader Puma lineup. Now, whenever I talk about a running shoe brand, I always like to start with the daily trainer, and from Puma, that is the Velocity Nitro 3. This is the kind of shoe that you would reach for most of your runs on most of the days out of the week. It's a workhorse, and a daily trainer should be fun enough to be in for most of your runs, but also have the durability to last for that kind of mileage. Now, if you need something that is a little bit more cushion, that protects you just a little bit more, even if it's going to cost you a little bit of pace, that's where a max cushion shoe like the Magnify might come in handy. Now, I haven't tested the Magnify yet, so I don't have one in studio to show you, but I think one of the themes that you're gonna see in this Puma explainer portion of the video is that there's a lot of either or that happens in the Puma lineup. And the either or for the Magnify is going to be the Mag Max. This is another tall stack height max cushion shoe that also a bit peppy. So it's surprisingly soft, but surprisingly energetic. So you can take it for those recovery runs, but you can also really take it for some longer runs as well, or some time on feet kinds of runs. Now for racing from Puma, you have a couple of options, and the first one I'll talk about is the Deviate Elite 3. This is what a lot of the Puma pros are choosing and preferring to be able to race in. It's one of the lightest racing shoes that's on the market. It's got an elite racing foam in here, and it's got a very snappy carbon fiber plate. And in between the race shoe and the daily trainer is the workout or session shoe, and that is the Deviate 3 from Puma, not to be confused with the Deviate Elite 3. This is just the regular Deviate 3. It's got a couple of features that make it somewhat similar to a daily trainer, but a couple of features like a carbon fiber plate and some upgraded foams that make it kind of like a race shoe. And this is something that you would take for a lot of your workouts during a race training block, but it has a little bit more durability to it too. So you're not using up all your fast miles in your race shoes before it comes to be race day. Now, there are some alternatives to pretty much all these, like we talked about with the Magnify and the Mag Max. And that's where a shoe like the Forever Run 2 comes in. This is a light stability shoe, but it's a daily trainer. So if you need some more motion control than what the Velocity has to offer, or you just want a little bit more stack height than what the Velocity has to offer, you can substitute in the Forever Run 2. And an alternative to the race shoe of the Deviate Elite 3 is a shoe that I've really also enjoyed, which is the Fast R2. Again, this has a upgraded race caliber foam and a very aggressive carbon fiber plate. It's even got a little bit of an underbite here, some extra carbon for some extra leverage on that toe off. So if you've got a really strong push off, this is the kind of shoe that you're gonna want to race in. It's a little bit heavier though, so there are some differences in terms of preferences, but it also fits in the race space. And then if you are not a marathoner and you're looking for a shoe to take for your workouts, let's say you're a collegiate or high school runner and you're looking for something that you could use for some road workouts, but for some track workouts as well, you probably won't want the Deviate Nitro 3. Instead, you'll want to reach for the Liberate. This is the Liberate version 1. I believe they're on Liberate version 2. This is a very low stack height, very snappy, not super cushioned shoe that feels very fast. It's basically like a race flat. And so that would fit in as your workout shoe. But because I don't really spend a lot of time on the track, for me, the Deviate Nitro 3, which was my shoe of the year last year, is a shoe that I'd prefer to have in this tempo or workout shoe category. And so if I were to include the Forever Run 2, this is pretty much how I would set up my lineup and rotation from Puma. Now, let's wrap up the video by going over the buying guide, and we'll also discuss some alternatives. The Puma Forever Run 2 is a light stability daily trainer that works really well for a wide variety of paces. It's fast, fits well, and its motion control isn't overly assertive. At $150, it's the same price as last year, and right now I'm feeling like it's a bit on the expensive side, especially when those last year's versions can be found at reputable online dealers for as low as $105. But keep in mind, those are two different running experiences. Forever Run version 1 is a little bit more chill and relaxed, so if you want something that has a little bit more pace versatility, I'd say you're gonna look at $150 for version 2. But let's take a look at some of the alternatives that are on the market to see where that $150 price point really stacks up. The first shoe that I thought about when I was thinking about the Forever Run 2 and some alternatives is from Diadora, and that's the Nucleo 2. Now, I think these two shoes are trying to do pretty much the exact same type of thing. They're both intended to be daily trainers, kind of targeting high mileage runners by offering light stability in the shoes. But I think the Diadora goes a little bit further than the Forever Run does in a couple of aspects. One, I feel like as far as the softness of the forefoot goes, the Nucleo 2 is a lot softer of an experience. It borderline is mushy compared to the bounciness of the Forever Run 2. And so if you're looking for something that has a little bit more squish to it, I'd say go with the Nucleo 2. Also, I feel like the Nucleo 2 has more stability and motion control of a feel to it. So I feel like there's more assertiveness underneath the arch, more assertiveness of the shoe in the heel, like it's trying to convince my foot to do something different than it or otherwise normally would want to do. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit more motion controlled, but also a little bit softer than the Forever Run 2, I'd say go with the Diadora Nucleo 2. But that shoe is going to come at a premium at $160. And then the other shoe that I think compares really well against the Forever Run 2 is from Saucony, and this is the Ride 18. Now the Ride 18 isn't technically a light stability shoe, but again, I think these two shoes are still trying to do a lot of the same things and in a lot of the same ways, because Saucony likes to put a little hint of stability in a lot of their shoes that they would just call just straight up neutral daily trainers. Now, even though the Saucony is using a different chemical composition of foam, they're using a beaded foam here in their Power Run Plus, underfoot, at least in the forefoot portion of the shoes, I feel like I'm getting a pretty similar experience across both of these two shoes. If I think about it really closely, there are some slight differences, but for the most part, I feel like these are very comparable forefoot experiences. The Saucony also does have a little hint that there is some motion control underneath the arch of this shoe, and also on the medial side, you can kind of see the geometry is all kind of pointing to the center of the arch and indicating that they're really going to be working to prevent this shoe from collapsing inward as your foot hits the ground. I'd say the main difference between these two shoes is in the heels though. The Ride 18 is a much looser heel in the back, and it doesn't have as much of the armor that the Forever Run 2 has. And so if you're not being very careful about how you're lacing up this shoe, you might find the Ride 18 to be completely loosey-goosey in comparison to what's going on in the back of the Forever Run 2. But for people that like a little bit less going on in terms of construction and armor and other structural elements in the heel cup of the shoe, kind of like how I normally like it, I feel like you'll prefer the way that the heel treats you on the Ride 18. And that shoe comes in at $10 cheaper than the Forever Run 2 at $140. So depending on how much assertiveness you want in the light stability, I think that's what really is going to help you decide between these two shoes. So those are my thoughts on the Forever Run 2. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions about this shoe or any of the shoes that I talked about today, or better yet, stop by the live streams that I do over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel Mondays and Thursdays. I'd love to see you guys over there in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?